What if I told you that the future of global power isn't being decided in Washington, Beijing, or Moscow, but in a city so small it barely registers on a world map? Why is it that every major superpower on Earth is quietly watching Singapore, calculating, waiting? This isn't a coincidence, this isn't admiration, and it certainly isn't accidental. Behind the polished skyline, the flawless infrastructure, and the calm, orderly streets lies something far more powerful, something that makes the world's most dominant nations pay very close attention. Singapore doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it doesn't boast, but it terrifies in silence. Welcome to Geo Chronicles, the channel where geography, power, and hidden strategy collide. Here, we don't just tell you what is happening in the world, we reveal why it's happening and who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Tonight, we're uncovering the real reason every superpower is watching Singapore. And once you see it, you'll never look at this tiny nation the same way again. Stay with me, because the final truth changes everything. Point 1. The most dangerous location on Earth. Singapore's greatest weapon isn't its military, it's geography. Look at a map and suddenly everything makes sense. Singapore sits at the Strait of Malacca, one of the most important maritime choke points on Earth. Nearly 1/3 of global trade passes through these waters. Oil from the Middle East, goods from China, supplies for Japan, South Korea, and beyond. If this narrow passage were disrupted, even briefly, the global economy would feel it instantly. Fuel prices would explode, supply chains would collapse, entire nations would panic. And Singapore? Singapore stands at the center of it all. That's why every superpower watches this city-state so closely. Not because Singapore controls the strait, but because its stability ensures the world keeps moving. If Singapore ever fell into chaos or aligned too strongly with one side, the balance of global trade would shatter overnight. This is why the United States maintains a strong naval presence nearby, why China studies every diplomatic move Singapore makes, why even Europe treats Singapore like a strategic jewel. It's not about size, it's about position. Singapore is proof that in geopolitics, where you stand can matter more than how big you are. And right now, Singapore stands at the throat of the global economy. Point 2. The neutral power everyone needs. Singapore has mastered something no superpower ever truly could: trust. It is one of the rare places on Earth where the United States, China, Russia, and regional powers all feel comfortable operating. High-level meetings, back-channel negotiations, sensitive financial discussions. This neutrality is not weakness, it's strategy. Singapore doesn't pick sides publicly. It doesn't inflame tensions. It listens, it hosts, it observes, and in doing so, it becomes indispensable. When the US and China can't speak openly elsewhere, they speak through Singapore. When global corporations fear political instability, they anchor themselves here. When intelligence agencies need a stable, discrete hub, they look to Singapore. This makes the city-state extraordinarily powerful, but also extremely vulnerable, because neutrality only works as long as everyone respects it. Every superpower is watching Singapore for one reason: will it remain neutral when the world fractures further? The moment Singapore is forced to choose, the global chessboard shifts dramatically, and everyone knows it. Point 3. The financial heartbeat of the East. Money moves faster than armies, And Singapore is where it pauses to breathe. As one of the world's most important financial hubs, Singapore quietly manages trillions of dollars in assets, investments, and trade financing. It's where Eastern and Western capital meet without friction. But that's exactly why superpowers are watching. In an era of sanctions, economic warfare, and digital currencies, control over financial gateways is as powerful as controlling territory. Singapore sits outside many political storms, yet remains deeply connected to all of them. If global finance fractures into rival systems, Singapore becomes a deciding factor. Will it bridge the divide, or will it be forced to align? The answer could redefine global economics for decades, and everyone knows it. Point 4. A military that no one underestimates. Singapore doesn't look like a military power. That's the illusion. Behind the scenes, it operates one of the most advanced, disciplined, and technologically integrated armed forces relative to its size anywhere on Earth. Mandatory service, cutting-edge technology, deep cooperation with Western militaries, constant readiness. Singapore understands a brutal truth. If it ever looks weak, it won't survive. Superpowers watch Singapore's military posture closely, not because they fear invasion, but because Singapore's defense strategy reveals how future small states might survive in a world dominated by giants. It is a blueprint, and blueprints are dangerous. Point 5. The future model of survival. Singapore isn't just surviving the future, it's rehearsing it. Smart surveillance, AI-driven urban planning, water independence, energy efficiency, social control balanced with economic freedom. To some, it's impressive. To others, it's unsettling. Superpowers are watching because Singapore may represent the future template for managing dense populations in a volatile world. A controlled, hyper-efficient city-state that functions flawlessly under pressure. The question is no longer what Singapore is. The question is, will the rest of the world be forced to become more like it? Singapore doesn't demand attention, it earns it, silently. While the world argues loudly, this small island watches, calculates, and positions itself for whatever comes next. That's why every superpower keeps one eye on Singapore at all times. Because if the global order breaks, if trade routes collapse, if diplomacy fails, Singapore won't be reacting. It will already be ready. And that may be the most shocking truth of all. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe to Geo Chronicles. Here, we uncover the stories no one else is telling and the truths hiding in plain sight. Because in geopolitics, the quietest places often matter the most. And Singapore, it's anything but small.